A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
Have you ever looked at a map of the Levant and felt like you have basically memorized every single pixel? There is this specific kind of fatigue that hits when you have lived in a country as compact as Israel for a long time. You start to feel like the borders are closing in, and you have seen every historical marker, every brown national park sign, and every nature reserve twice over. It is that been there, done that energy that sets in around year 5 or year 50. You feel like the country is a known quantity, a finished puzzle where every piece has been snapped into place.
It is a fascinating psychological phenomenon, corn. When you are dealing with a land mass of only 22,000 square kilometers, the mental map fills up incredibly fast. But today is about challenging that sense of completion. Today's prompt from Daniel is about those hidden nooks and less frequented places that even the seasoned Israeli traveler might have overlooked. I am Herman Poppleberry, by the way, and I have been digging into some geographical data that suggests we are barely scratching the surface of what is actually out there. Even here in March of 26, with all our satellites and sensors, the map is not the territory.
It is funny you say that because the intuition is usually the opposite. We have over 10 million people packed into this space now. The population density is pushing 500 people per square kilometer. In a place that crowded, the idea of a hidden spot feels like a mathematical impossibility. If there is a nice view or a cool spring, surely there is already a coffee truck, a pile of charcoal from a weekend barbecue, and a line of people waiting for a selfie there. It feels like there is no off switch for the crowd.
That is the widespread assumption, but it ignores the nuances of how people actually move through space. Most of the foot traffic in this country is concentrated on less than 5% of the available trails and public lands. We tend to be very habitual as a species, and especially as a culture. We go where the Waze algorithm tells us, and we stop where the parking lot is paved. But if you look at the spaces between the major urban centers and the big-name national parks, there is this massive amount of microgeography that is essentially invisible to the average weekend warrior. We are talking about the blind spots of the collective consciousness.
So we are talking about the spaces in between. I like that. But before we get into the actual coordinates, how do we define hidden in the age of high-resolution satellite imagery and crowdsource mapping? You cannot really hide a canyon from Google Earth in 26. We have sub-meter resolution available to anyone with a smartphone.
You are hitting on a key distinction. Nothing is hidden from a sensor. But something can be very hidden from the collective attention. I like to think of it as a function of intent. A place is hidden if it requires a different kind of curiosity to find. For example, everyone knows the Judean desert, and everyone knows Ein Gedi. It is beautiful, but on a Saturday it is basically a shopping mall with waterfalls. However, if you move just a few kilometers north or south into the lesser-known wadis, the experience changes entirely. We are moving from tourist sites to micro-geographies.
You are thinking of the seasonal wadis, right? The ones that do not have a constant water source, but have these incredible geological formations.
Think about the northern sections of the Judean desert near the Dead Sea. Most people drive right past the smaller canyons because they are looking for the big waterfalls or the famous hikes like Nahal Arugat. But if you explore the limestone folds in the areas that do not have a marked parking lot, you find these massive natural amphitheaters and ancient hermit cells carved into the rock that are not on the standard tourist maps. The biodiversity there is actually higher in the winter and spring because they are less disturbed by human presence. You get these rare desert blooms and birds of prey, like the Egyptian vulture or the sooty falcon, that would never nest near the crowded trails of the main reserves.
That brings up an interesting technical point. We have seen this explosion in geographic information systems and apps like Amud Anan or the Israel hiking map. Does that technology make it harder to have an authentic discovery? Or does it give us the tools to find these spots? I remember when Amud Anan first started getting popular, it felt like every secret cistern was suddenly public knowledge.
It is a double-edged sword. On one hand, you have thousands of people uploading every single archaeological ruin and viewpoint they find. On the other hand, the sheer volume of data creates a new kind of obscurity. There is so much information that people default to the highest rated spots. They look for the 5-star reviews on a hiking app. If a spot only has 2 reviews from 3 years ago and no photos, most people skip it. That is exactly where you want to go. The data is there, but the crowd has not followed it yet. It is the long tail of geography. You want to be in the niche interests, not the hits.
Let's move away from the desert for a second. I have always felt like the North is where people think they have seen it all, but they are usually just doing the same loop of the Sea of Galilee and the Golan Heights. They go to the same 3 wineries and the same 2 chocolate factories.
The North is a perfect example of what I call the peripheral anomaly. Take Haifa, for instance. Everyone goes to the Baha'i Gardens and the German colony. But if you look at the architecture in the lower city and the Hadar HaKarmel neighborhood, there is this incredible concentration of Bauhaus and international-style buildings that rival Tel Aviv, yet they are almost entirely ignored by the architectural tours. In Tel Aviv, the Bauhaus is a brand. It is the white city. It is polished and expensive. In Haifa, it is just the building where the local bakery or the hardware store is located. It feels much more integrated and less like a museum.
I have noticed that. In Haifa, the history feels heavier, maybe because it is built into the side of a mountain. You have these tiny steep staircases and alleyways that connect the levels of the city.
And that makes the experience of seeing it much more rewarding. You are walking through a living history rather than a curated exhibit. There is this specific area in Haifa where the mountain meets the sea in a way that created these vertical neighborhoods. You could walk for an hour through these residential nooks, through the staircase month routes, and never see another person with a camera. It is a vertical geography that most visitors never bother to climb because it is physically demanding and does not have a clear destination at the top.
It sounds like we are talking about a shift from tourist sites to textures. It is not about the destination as much as the grain of the area. But what about the cultural side of this? We often talk about the Druze villages in the Galilee as these places to get a quick lunch on the way to a hike, but there is more depth there if you look for it, right?
There is a massive shift happening in places like Yanujat, Herfish, or Beit John. For a long time, the interaction was very transactional. You stop, you buy some olive oil or a pita with labana, and you leave. But lately, there has been a rise in high-end, home-based hospitality that is very different from the commercialized experience in Druze hubs like Daliat El Carmel. You have these families opening up their homes for multi-course traditional meals that are basically masterclasses in Levantine history and Galilean foraging. It is hidden because it is not advertised on big billboards. You have to find it through local networks or specific culinary maps that focus on slow food.
That requires a level of slow travel that I think a lot of people struggle with. We are a high-intensity culture. We like to check things off the list. Did the Golan? Check. Did the Dead Sea? Check. To find these spots, you have to be willing to waste a little bit of time, which feels almost countercultural here. We are always rushing to the next thing.
You are spot on about the cultural friction. We are conditioned to move fast, partly because the country is so small that we feel we should be able to see everything in a weekend. But the second order effect of that speed is that we miss the transition zones. The most interesting parts of Israel are often the borders between different ecosystems or cultures. If you look at the Arava Valley, most people see it as the long, boring stretch of Road 90 on the way to Eilat. They put on a podcast and floor it. But if you actually pull over and look at the industrial archaeology there, it is fascinating.
Industrial archaeology? You mean the old mines and potash works? That sounds a bit niche, even for us, Herman.
It is niche, but that is the point. We are talking about the literal structures of early Israeli industry. There are these abandoned phosphate mines and old waterworks near the Zin Valley that have a very stark, haunting aesthetic. For someone who appreciates a more brutalist or industrial landscape, these are hidden gems. They tell a story of the country's development that is much more gritty and complicated than the heroic making the desert bloom narratives we usually hear. You see the rust, the scale of the earth moving, and the sheer audacity of trying to build an industrial base in a salt desert.
I can see that appealing to a certain type of traveler, the kind of person who likes urban exploring but in a desert setting. But we have to talk about the impact of this. If we start encouraging people to find these hidden nooks, do we risk ruining them? We have seen what happens when a quiet spring in the Jerusalem hills goes viral on TikTok or Instagram. The infrastructure cannot handle it. The trash piles up, and the local ecosystem takes a hit. The hidden pool in the Golan is a prime example. It went from a local secret to a disaster zone in one summer.
That is a serious concern. The Instagrammability of a site is often its death knell. Once a spot is tagged with a precise coordinate, it is no longer hidden, and it is often no longer beautiful within a year. This is why I think the concept of hidden needs to be tied to a certain ethic of travel. It is not just about finding the spot, it is about how you treat it. We are seeing the degradation of local infrastructure because our parks were designed for 1980s levels of traffic, not 2026 levels of social media-driven surges.
So maybe the real hidden spots are the ones we do not talk about on social media. But that creates a paradox for a podcast, doesn't it? We are talking about them right now to thousands of people.
We are talking about the categories and the mindsets, which I think is safer. If we give people the tools to find their own spots, they are more likely to feel a sense of ownership and responsibility. It is like the difference between being given a fish and being taught how to fish. If you find a spot through your own research, looking at old British mandate maps or geological surveys, you are less likely to treat it like a disposable backdrop for a photo. You have invested effort into the discovery.
I want to circle back to the logistics. In episode 615, we talked about the technical side of public transport in Israel. A lot of these hidden spots seem like they would be impossible to reach without a private vehicle. Does that make this kind of exploration elitist? Is hidden geography only for people with a 4x4?
It is a challenge, but as we discussed in that episode, it is not insurmountable. If you use the public transit data effectively, you can actually get surprisingly close to some of these remote hubs. The bus network into the Galilee and the central Negev is actually quite dense because of the need to serve small communal settlements. The trick is using the stop data to find the trailheads that are not the primary ones. Most people take the bus to the main park entrance of, say, Ein Avdat. But if you get off at a random stop near a smaller kibbutz or a youth village, you can often find local paths that lead into the same geography but from a completely different, uncrowded angle. It is about spatial hacking.
Spatial hacking. I like that. It is about using the existing infrastructure in a way it was not necessarily intended for. It is like finding a backdoor into the landscape.
Another example of this is the Israel National Trail, Shvil, Israel. It is over 1,000 kilometers long now, and most locals have hiked maybe 5% of it, usually the same sections in the Dan region or the Carmel. But the trail is designed to hit the highlights. If you look at the segments that are considered boring or difficult to reach, those are often the most rewarding because you have the entire landscape to yourself. There is a section in the southern Hebron Hills and the northern Negev transition zone that is geologically unique, with these rolling Loess hills and ancient agricultural terraces. But it gets very little traffic compared to the segments in the north.
I think the hesitation for a lot of people is the perceived danger or the lack of facilities. We are a country that loves a good visitor center with a clean bathroom and a gift shop. The idea of going somewhere where there is no one else and no facilities can be a bit intimidating, especially with the heat.
It requires a different level of preparation, certainly. You need to carry more water, you need a backup power bank, and you need to know how to read a topographic map, not just follow a blue dot on a screen. But that is part of the reward. The sense of self-reliance you get from navigating a non-tourist site is part of the experience. And from a safety perspective, as long as you have good communication tools and you have checked the flood alerts, which are crucial this time of year in March, it is no more dangerous than the popular sites. In fact, it is often safer because you are not dealing with the hazards of overcrowded trails or distracted drivers in the parking lots.
Let's talk about the Arava again. You mentioned industrial archaeology, but there is also a very cool agricultural side to the hidden geography there. The way they have turned the most inhospitable desert in the world into a global hub for peppers and tomatoes is well known. But the actual research stations are these incredible places to visit.
The Vidor Center is the one most people know, but if you dig deeper and look at the actual experimental plots where they are testing things like desert viticulture or saltwater irrigation, it is like stepping into a science fiction novel. You see these rows of vines growing out of what looks like pure sand, controlled by AI-driven sensors that measure the sap flow in the stems. It is a testament to human ingenuity and a very specific Zionist vision of making the desert bloom, but updated for the 21st century. It is hidden because we usually think of agriculture as something green and lush, not something that looks like a laboratory in the middle of a brown wasteland.
It is that pro-innovation spirit that I think defines a lot of these hidden experiences. It is not just about looking at old rocks, it is about seeing how the land is being used in new ways, which leads me to a question about the future. With the climate warming up, do you think our relationship with these hidden spots is going to change? Are we going to be forced into the shade of the northern canyons more often?
We are already seeing a shift toward more seasonal and nocturnal exploration. Night hiking in the desert, especially in the Pratsum Flower Cave area or the White Marl formations near the Dead Sea, is becoming more popular. It reveals a completely different version of the geography. The landscape looks totally different under a full moon. It looks like the surface of another planet, and the wildlife is much more active. There is a whole world of hidden geography that only exists between sunset and sunrise.
That is a wild thought. A place can be hidden just by the time of day you visit it. You could go to a place you have been a dozen times during the day, and if you go at 2 in the morning, it is a completely different world. The shadows change, the sounds change, the temperature drops.
And that is the core of the argument. If you think you have seen it all, you are looking at the map, not the ground. You are looking at the site, not the experience. Even in a country this small, the combinations of time, perspective, and intent are infinite. You can find a hidden nook 10 kilometers from your house if you just decide to walk in a direction you have never gone before.
I love that. It is a very empowering way to look at travel. You do not need a flight to the other side of the world to find something new. You just need to change your resolution. So, if someone is listening to this and they are convinced they have done it all, what is the first step? How do they actually start finding these nooks? Give us the Herman Poppleberry method.
I would suggest the 10-kilometer rule. Pick a point on a map that is 10 kilometers away from any major highway and look at the local topography. Look for the folds in the land, the smaller streams, or the ruins that do not have a Wikipedia page yet. Use tools like satellite imagery to look for patterns that seem out of place. Often, a clump of trees in the middle of a dry field indicates an old well or a hidden spring. Or look for tell sites, ancient mounds that are not part of a national park. There are hundreds of them scattered across the Shephelah and the Galilee.
And what about the timing? You mentioned off-peak travel.
This is crucial. If you want to see a site as it functions for locals or as it exists in its natural state, you have to go when everyone else is at work or asleep. A Tuesday morning in a Druze village is a completely different cultural experience than a Saturday afternoon. You see the rhythm of daily life, the school buses, the local markets. You are no longer a consumer of a tourist experience. You are a witness to the actual reality of the place.
It is about moving from being a consumer of experiences to being an observer of reality. That is a deep shift. I think it also applies to how we document these things. If you find a hidden spot, maybe keep the camera in the bag for the first hour. Just be there. Do not worry about the content for a second.
The documentation should be for yourself first. If you feel the need to share it, do it in a way that respects the site. Maybe describe the feeling of the place or the history you learned rather than giving away the exact GPS coordinates in a public post. Leave some mystery for the next person. That mystery is what makes the discovery feel earned.
We have talked about the desert, the north, and the industrial sites. What about the center of the country? People think of the center as just one big urban sprawl from Gadara to Hedera. Is there anything hidden left in the heart of the country? Or has it all been paved over for luxury apartments and tech hubs?
There actually is. If you look at the agricultural belts between the cities, there are these pockets of old orchards and Ottoman-era farmhouses that have been bypassed by the highway expansions. There is a specific area near the Ben Gurion Airport, of all places, where you can find these ancient olive groves that are hundreds of years old. You are standing under these massive, twisted trees, and you can hear the planes taking off every 2 minutes, but you feel like you are in a different century. It is a bizarre and beautiful juxtaposition of the ancient and the ultra-modern.
It is that contrast that makes Israel so unique. The high-tech and the ancient are constantly rubbing up against each other. You can be checking your emails on a 5G network while standing in a Crusader ruin or an Iron Age wine press.
And that is why I think the term hidden is so appropriate. The history is layered so thickly here that you are always walking on top of something. Every time they dig a new light rail line in Tel Aviv or a highway underpass in Jerusalem, they find a new hidden piece of geography. We are living in a three-dimensional puzzle where the pieces are constantly being rediscovered. The hidden is not just out in the desert, it is right under our feet in the middle of the city.
So the takeaway is that familiarity is an illusion. It is just a lack of attention. If you think you have seen it all, you just need to zoom in.
Or zoom out. Sometimes you need to see the context of how a place fits into the larger region, how the geology of the Jordan Rift Valley affects the climate of a specific hillside to understand why it is special. But generally, yes, the depth is there if you are willing to look for it. We are a small country, but we are a deep one.
I think this is a good place to start wrapping up. We have covered a lot of ground, literally and figuratively. It is clear that even in a tiny country like Israel, there is enough hidden geography to last a lifetime if you know how to look. It is about the intent, the timing, and the willingness to step off the paved path.
It is all about the intent. If you go out looking for a checklist, you will find a checklist. If you go out looking for a conversation with the land and the culture, you will find something new every single time. The map is never finished.
Well, I am definitely feeling inspired to go look at a map of my own neighborhood with some fresh eyes. Maybe there is an Ottoman farmhouse or a hidden cistern I have been driving past for 5 years.
I would bet on it. There is almost always something hiding in plain sight.
Thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flemingtop, for keeping us on track and making sure we do not wander too far into the desert. And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power this show and keep our research capabilities sharp.
This has been My Weird Prompts. We really appreciate you spending your time with us as we dive into these geographical rabbit holes.
If you enjoyed this exploration of the hidden side of Israel, we would love it if you could leave us a review on your podcast app. It really helps other curious minds find the show and join the conversation.
We will see you next time for more deep dives and unexpected questions.
Take care of yourselves, stay curious, and keep looking for the spaces in between.
Goodbye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My weird prompts, that's the close from slow